up and welcome to another and a new episode for the Funky Pod, Mindful Media and Communication. Happy New Year to everybody, since this is the first episode of the new year. And what better way to kick it off than with the Netflix phenomenon that just occurred. No, it's not WWE. We're gonna talk about this on the next episode. We're gonna focus on the phenomenon that happened before, during Christmas, after you had like enough food, you were fed up with your family, you hid on your couch, on your sofa, in the bed, blanket over your head so no one can find you and you're all by yourself, and then you hit the play button and you watched Squid Games, right? If not, spoiler alert right here, right now, I don't want to say switch off, but spoilers, obviously. Because I want to talk about Squid Game Season 2, the hype, the media theories that are in there, because that's what we do here at the Funky Pod. And of course also, well, did it reach the levels of expectations that we had, or did it fall short in the end, right? So, we all remember Squid Game Season 1, right? That huge global phenomenon that kind of like hit us like out of nowhere, especially if you're more at home in the Western world. Yeah, I think Season 1 was in 2021 during COVID. And we saw a really big cultural impact back then, right? I mean, K-pop has been a thing like for a longer time, but just Korean pop culture itself with Korean TV shows. And we had Korean movies like Parasite before, here and there, of course, but it just became more mainstream and people became more familiar with K-dramas, K-pop, and whatnot. So Netflix increased its strategy, strengthened the strategy to invest in like not only Western content, which makes sense because of course not the whole audience is Western centric, obviously, right? So now the main question I have after like this insane success of Season 1 is, why does Season 2, if you look at the internet, online, social media, and if you ask me, why did it feel a little bit underwhelming? And I take it away now, like my final judgment. Why did it feel a little bit underwhelming, despite it's actually really star-studded cast, like Thanos for the win, for example, right? And the massive hype that was around it, like the marketing machine that was going on, still is going on here in Bangkok. BTS, like the SkyTrain, not the pop group, the SkyTrain, is full of Squid Game advertisement. They advertised together with what did I just see? So some noodles, whatever noodle that is. They're like, I forgot, with other brands too, like Squid Game everywhere, right? So now there's way more marketing before the start than with Season 1. Season 1 was like, oh my god, you have to see it, and there was no marketing before, not much. And now it's like so much hype, but then a little bit of disappointment. So I think to look at that, we kind of quickly check out like, why was Season 1 so super successful, and then maybe we see like a few differences to Season 2, right? So I think for Season 1, what really worked quite well was like that thematic appeal that we haven't seen before. Yeah, those universal fears that everybody has, like death, inequality, survival. How do I make my life work, especially during COVID? And so, yeah, in this pandemic world that we've been living in, post-pandemic world, if you will, in 2021 already, it was kind of like I want to say a socio-economic commentary on like, right, we're all struggling, there's not enough money to pay the debt, and so on. Like, how far would you go? What would you do to just get that money and rid of all your sorrows? And I think a few media theories that we usually discuss in class that also fit in here very well is one that we have that's called cultural proximity theory. In this case, I would apply it in a form where I would say like that the South Korean culture becomes more relatable on a global scale. So usually it's like, right, if you're in direct proximity, in close proximity to something, it's very relatable. And in this case, the creators found a way to not only relate to the South Korean audience or then maybe the Asian audience, but to a global audience by tapping into those universal fears such as debt, inequality, and how do I survive, right? So they used like those global fears, I want to call it, to then link it to also the South Korean culture, which was pretty smart, of course. And then another theory that fits in there is one that I talk about a lot here on the podcast, so you should know it by now. It's called Cultivation Theory. Cultivation theory simply means the more you're exposed to something, the more you see something, the more you understand it and maybe kind of agree with it, or at least you understand the train of thought, okay? So in this case, I think the show, season 1 in particular, had an impact on the perception of social inequality. Now, that wasn't something that's been shown a lot, especially not in South Korean dramas, right? So K-dramas, while they're very engaging and have a huge fan base, they're not always something to talk about like societal inequalities and things like this. They're like sticking usually very much to stereotypes, I want to say. It's getting much better now, according to my students who are all into that, of course. But it's still like not as progressive as you would think it might be in 2025. Of course, then the success and the wow factor led to like this virality, right? Going viral spread, the word of mouth on digital platforms, of course. So memes, TikTok took off with Squid Games took off on TikToks, of course. Lots of fan theories, which also happens on season 2, like who's behind all that? What's gonna be next? What's the next game gonna be, right? So this is something we haven't seen before. So that's why it caught on so quickly. And now for season 2, we expected it. So like, yeah, I know what you're doing now with all that, all right? And I think also the media convergence, another theory for you, fits in well here, because it means that conversion means you're bringing different forms of interaction together, right? We're converting them. And so it's not just watching Squid Games, but it's also fan-created content became like more important. We have seen it before. It's not a unique thing to Squid Games, but I don't think we have seen it as much on like a TV show / Netflix show. I mean, you might have seen it with like Harry Potter, for example, where there's fan fiction about it, with Star Wars, the Star Wars universe, all those things. Yeah, sure, Star Trek, all those things, but not necessarily with lots of Netflix shows or TV shows either. Okay, so that's something that was pretty new in terms of like happening for an actual show on Netflix that hasn't had any much hype compared to other famous shows to it, right? And then, of course, I mean, lastly, there's also a strategy I want to mention because it's a little bit like business related, so I also want to expose you to that a little bit. And we talk about like globalization, right? Globalization, in this case of media consumption, simply meaning that Netflix algorithm, of course, would try to push Squid Games into like most people's feeds. Like, yeah, the algorithm is tailored to you, but if you have the right trigger words, categories, segments, and so on, that's how the Netflix, of course, tries to also show it to you, even though you don't watch Korean dramas necessarily, but it's like, hey, you're watching suspense. Squid Games is kind of suspense. Look at it, for example, right? So, well, that's simply how Squid Game tried to expose it to as many people as possible. Okay, but hey, that was season 1 recap kind of, right? So that's why was it so successful. Now we're focusing on season 2, and well, why it fell short a little bit. It's not to say I didn't have fun with it. Yeah, of course there was some fun in that, but overall it did fall a bit short, and here's why. Okay, so first, I think the anticipation was so high, right? It was such a success before. The anticipation was so high, it's just hard to match if something has such a high anticipation. That is not an excuse though, and more on this in a second, but I think that was one reason. Then of course the casting, like a K-pop superstar such as T.O.P from Big Bang and other celebrities in there, simply like raised the bar. You're like, oh my god, right? Those celebrities, they're gonna make it like feel special. And T.O.P, to be fair, spoiler, while it lasted, he did, right? He added like something to it. And if you, like me, know someone who is really anchored in the K-pop scene and knows their stuff, then you actually appreciate it even more, because you've been told like, hey, that's actually the dance he does in his videos, and he got caught for drugs back then, like 9 years ago, so, and he didn't work in Korea for such a long time, and now he's coming back and he plays someone who's taking drugs. Oh my god, so crazy. So that's something that you really appreciate then. Okay, so that is very, 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 very cool. And that, of course, also then leverages the fandom of, like, marketing fandom, basically, or the fandom of not just Squid Game fans, but also of K-pop / Big Bang fans, of course, in this case, right? Now, the thing is, if you then leverage different fandoms, the hype gets bigger, which is great, but the expectations get bigger too, right? I'm pretty sure that with the death of Thanos, like T.O.P, spoiler, lots of Big Bang fans were like, what? what? Huh? And not even in the finale? Like, what? Right, so expectations up there, and then maybe a bit of a letdown here. And yes, of course, we know from Game of Thrones, right, or from the previous season, you gotta kill off some of the beloved characters, and yeah, he clearly was one, even though he was like a bad guy. But still, like, expectations of the fandom very high, and then, of course, people talk about it, maybe a little bit disappointed. And that leads me to like one thing that just doesn't feel as right now, because it feels a little bit like Squid Game season 2 is production and marketing over substance. Yeah, so I think there's a shift in tone and narrative focus. And what I mean by that is simply that now it's not as suspenseful. And it's understandable. It's not as suspenseful in regards to what game are they going to play. We've seen they play games, and even though they play different games now, right? Some are the same, some different. It's still like, okay, we know they're walking up those stairs, they're going to play a game right now, right? So, of course, the narrative has to change a little bit from like surprise game to like maybe what's happening in between, right? When they try to over topple the guards and things like this. Then again, you would think, okay, I understand they changed the narrative a little bit. However, like the shootout, for example, right, that we see, it seems like almost the whole half the episode maybe is about that shootout, right? Could have been spent probably also better, or like more time could have spent on like crafting a better narrative. Because there are some plot holes in there where you think like, huh, what? No, why? Just to drive the narrative forward. And maybe I'm nitpicking, pet peeve of mine, I'm teaching storytelling at uni, so maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm like picking on that, but I think maybe that's also why you're listening, or why you're tuning in, because, and I'm not gonna pick on every single plot hole, because, I mean, of course, if you watch something that you enjoy, you just suspend disbelief a little bit, of course, but still, I think they could have done better. So the potential is clearly there. People are anticipating so much, so I think it should have been more focused on the narratives rather than on like fantastic production. Because I mean, it's a Netflix show. Of course, you have production value, but I mean, don't have a 30-minute shootout. I mean, that's pretty silly too when you think about it. And maybe drive the narrative a bit forward. Okay, say, breathe. This then of course also like I'm hesitating to hate on it, but season 1 just felt more authentic also with the characters. Right? And now the characters, I mean, we all see that like the main character is getting annoying when it was his hero mode, and yeah, we probably all think by now that he's gonna turn and he's gonna be the front guy in the end, like after in season 3, that he's gonna end up leading the game probably. But it's just very obvious character arcs right now, which is just a little bit annoying. A few pitfalls there when it comes to the narrative. I mean, we see lots of recycling from season 1. Like, I mean, the death games, yeah, but there's just not as much shock in there anymore, right? It's just, you're going for the shock, sure, but the shock value is different compared to season 1, because now we are used to it, so we gotta do something else to shock us, not just shoot them, maybe, right? Also maybe, and I'm just putting it out there, you let me know, maybe that overcrowded cast is also like diluting like those individual arcs just a little bit, and maybe also taking away from audience empathy, because now we're all T.O.P fans, Thanos fans. We're like, Thanos is so cool, he's hilarious, oh my god, so funny. And then we have less sympathy for the actual heroes of the show, maybe. Okay, this could also be something, but I'm letting you decide that. A few more just theories I want to throw at you, if I may, in regards to why season 2 is falling short from my point of view. One theory I have in class frequently is called expectation gap theory. That's basically what I just talked about the last 10 minutes. Your audience anticipation is up there. You build it over a year, over 2 years, right? 2021, okay, 2024, 3 years. Build it over that was the end of 21, right? So 2.5 years, you build the anticipation, build it more. So it's those impossible standards to reach, right? And then, of course, now it's falling short. Then what I just said in the last point, that star power and that narrative cohesion, maybe star power, Thanos, hilarious, overshines all the others a little bit. Maybe that's also why they kill him off, like, hey, let's get rid of him, right? It's always the case in serialized storytelling, though. If you add some celebrities to a series, the celebrity will take away shine. That's always the case. It was in Friends the case when celebrities popped in for 1 or 2 episodes. The same case here. So normal, right? But still something to consider. What I do like in this case, though, but that's just me, is like, of course, how T.O.P's comeback was structured here. And also, I mean, the director talked about it, actually. He said, like, it's kind of crazy that, like, T.O.P wasn't able to work in Korea for the past 9 years or so because he got caught with weed, I believe, some kind of drugs, allegedly. And so now he's coming back and plays like a drug user, which is crazy, right? And in Korea, I've read, so if you're from Korea, if you're entrenched in the culture, please do let me know. That's all I read in preparation here right now, is that it's been like a mixed reaction. Like, of course, younger audience or Squid Game fans or Big Bang fans are like, that's funny, that's hilarious, so cool to see him back. Others are like, that's not our culture. So there's just this kind of like this connection here, kind of interesting. One thing that's real is sequel fatigue. We call it theory-wise serial position effect. Usually people remember initial impressions more favorably than follow-ups. It's just like, oh yeah, the original was so much better. You remember back then? That was so good. That's just how it goes usually. Usually you remember the original, the OG. You're like, man, the OG Karate Kid so much better than Cobra Kai. It's always like that. Okay, still looking forward to Cobra Kai. But so that's just normal that we always favor the old stuff. It's like, yeah, good old times, basically, right? So that's why also sequels have a hard time like living up to the standards of the original. There's also something that in this connection that we call the transition trap, and by we I mean myself. The thing that I mean by that, like transition gap, or I call this season 2. I call this like it's a transition season, okay? And that annoys me. So we know that season 2 and season 3 have been filmed simultaneously. There are reports out there, yes, they already filmed season 3, right? Gonna come out 2025. Cool. So now season 2 is clearly just there to move us from season 1 to season 3. So that's why in season 2, that ending, right? If you're not watching that, you should have watched that right now. I'm not repeating that verbally, what I just did. It's still so lackluster, and it just feels like you're just moving us along. And while this is understandable, I think that is incredibly disrespectful towards us as an audience. It's understandable from a production point of view. You want to just, make it longer, drag it out. You say, hey, we have superstars in there. What do you want? Yes, but nothing's really happening. Okay? No shock, no twists, no nothing. No narratives that are really interesting to follow. So it's a transition. And you kind of, as a producer, planning on making it all worth it with the season 3. But again, you're taking all my time to watch 7 episodes, like 7 hours of my life that you're taking to give me not what I expected. And that is pretty impolite. Well, so I think that's just, and that happens not only with Squid Games, by the way, that happens with lots of series. Right? Serial storytelling always has transition. Usually it's transition episodes, right? Not a whole transition season, just really, really, really annoying. Transition episode, I'm already mad. Like, if it's like weekly TV, for example, or weekly streaming, you're like, on a weekly release, like, okay, I was looking forward to watching this week, but okay, next week gonna be awesome. But this, a transition season, I have to wait until the next season. I do it again because that is annoying, okay? That is annoying. And here you're running the risk of losing an audience and losing engagement because this season feels incomplete and, as I said one more time, transitional, and that's annoying, okay? So I think season 2 played it way too safe to appeal to any kind of audience. International audience maybe in particular, or like non K-pop following audiences in particular, because while it's awesome to see like K-pop singers, stars in there, if you're not familiar with them, you're like, you don't have anything to root for, basically. Like, yeah. Like for me, who knows someone who lets them know who Top is, like, oh, that is very cool. If you're not familiar with it, right? If you're not on TikTok where people tell you all the time who Top is, you're like, okay, fine, whatever. And so that is pretty annoying from my point of view. And if you look at the bigger picture, to also wrap it up in within the next 5 minutes, yeah, of course there's a challenge of maintaining like what we call in media like creative integrity and in a very high pressure streaming environment, because of course Netflix has to like move fast, produce fast, finish fast, 2.5 years, and you want to also, of course, now that it's so successful, you have this balancing act. Like, do we appeal to the Korean / more Asian audience who's familiar with like behaviors and games and stuff like this, or do we try to appeal to the global audience that became aware of Squid Game season 1, and then we play it safe so that the global audience can also follow everything? That's of course also difficult, right? Globalization, local roots, like how do we mix it up, of course. So it's a risk versus reward kind of scenario. And maybe that even though you have a star-studded marketing, even though Top stepped back from it, right? Top was like, I'm not doing interviews, like it's not about me, it's about Squid Games and so on, which is very cool, but now the story is still about him. Like, does this then fail to deliver at some point, and does it not make up for the lackluster production we've been getting in the end, right? So, okay, so I don't want to make it extra long, unlike Squid Games. But so what Squid Game Season 2 teaches us about content creation, I think, is just that you can't rely on only stars and on only existing hype. Okay? It's also something we see in global media trends by now. Of course, hype works. And of course, it's a huge success still. But we can't hide from the fact that lots of people on social media are coming out and complaining about it. So I think that shows that it's essential for creators, especially if you don't have all that background ammunition such as Squid Games on Netflix. If you're like maybe not a big name and you want to create, you cannot have transitional episodes or even seasons, of course. It just lack impact. You will lose audiences, you will lose engagement, you will get hate. That's a big learning there, I think. So my last question for you might then be like, what you thought of season 2, of course. Did it meet your expectations? Am I a hater right now? Please do let me know. Shout out in the comments if you're on Spotify or otherwise. Social media, @FunkedPod on all the social channels. Be very much appreciated. Until then, of course, as always, stay safe, take care, be aware of all the games that are being played around you, and we talk soon. Saudi Cup.